You've probably met someone who barely scraped through school, has no fancy degrees, and somehow ended up making more money than half the people at your high school reunion. Meanwhile, you or someone you know has a master's degree, reads business books religiously, and is still fighting for a middle management position that pays less than what that dropout makes in a month. This isn't a fluke. This is a pattern. Here's what stings even more. While you were perfecting your resume and learning the right corporate buzzwords, these supposedly less intelligent people were out there building businesses, taking risks that made no sense on paper, and somehow landing on their feet every single time. They're driving cars you can't afford yet, taking vacations you're still planning for, and they did it all without understanding half the economic theories you spent years studying. It feels unfair because it is unfair, but not in the way you think. Research from the University of Stockholm found that people with average intelligence often accumulate wealth faster than those with exceptionally high IQs. Not sometimes. Often. The data doesn't care about your feelings or your LinkedIn endorsements. What it shows is that raw intelligence, the kind measured by tests and validated by institutions, has a weaker correlation with wealth building than most of us were taught to believe. Something else is happening here, and once you understand what it is, you'll see these people differently. You might even realize you've been playing the wrong game entirely. The fundamental mistake smart people make is treating wealth like an intellectual puzzle that can be solved through analysis. They research investment strategies for months before putting in a single dollar. They calculate risk ratios until the opportunity has already passed. They wait for perfect information in a world where perfect information doesn't exist. Meanwhile, the person everyone underestimated is already 3 businesses deep. 2 of them failed, but the third one is printing money because they learned something you can't get from a book. Speed beats precision when you're building wealth. Not recklessness, but speed. The ability to make a decision with incomplete information, act on it, and adjust course when reality punches back. Smart people struggle with this because their intelligence has been rewarded their entire lives for getting things right the first time. Take a test, get an A, write a paper, get published, follow the formula, receive the outcome. Wealth building doesn't work like that. Wealth building rewards the person who fails on Tuesday, learns the lesson by Wednesday, and has a new approach running by Friday. Think about how most intelligent people approach starting a business. They write business plans that could pass academic review. They model financial projections 3 years out. They research competitors until they can recite market share percentages in their sleep. Then they never actually start the business because there's always one more variable to account for, one more risk to mitigate, one more certification to obtain. The person who barely passed algebra doesn't do any of this. They see a problem people will pay to solve, figure out the minimum viable solution, and start selling it before the smart person finishes their executive summary. This creates a compounding advantage that most people completely miss. While the intelligent person is still in the preparation phase, the less academically gifted person is in the feedback phase. They're learning what customers actually want versus what they thought customers wanted. They're discovering which marketing messages work and which ones fall flat. They're building relationships with suppliers, negotiating deals, and making mistakes that teach them more in 3 months than a business degree teaches in 3 years. By the time the smart person feels ready to start, the other person is already pivoting to their second or third iteration, armed with real market data and actual revenue. But there's something deeper happening here that explains why this pattern is so consistent. Intelligence creates options, and options create paralysis. When you're smart enough to see 15 different paths forward, you spend enormous mental energy evaluating each one, comparing potential outcomes, and trying to select the optimal choice. The person with average intelligence sees maybe 3 paths, picks the one that feels right, and moves. They don't agonize over opportunity cost because they're not calculating opportunity cost. They're just going. Here's where it gets interesting. That decision-making speed creates something psychologists call momentum bias. Once you're moving, it becomes easier to keep moving. You build confidence not from knowing you're right, but from surviving being wrong. You develop pattern recognition from actual experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Your brain starts categorizing situations based on what happened last time you were in something similar, not based on what a textbook said should happen. This is wisdom, and wisdom compounds faster than knowledge because it's personalized to your specific circumstances and failures. The wealth gap widens because of what happens next. The intelligent person, still researching and planning, watches the less intelligent person succeed and attributes it to luck. They tell themselves that person got in at the right time, knew the right people, or benefited from circumstances that won't repeat. This protects their ego, but destroys their potential because it prevents them from seeing what actually drove that success. It wasn't luck, it was action bias, pain tolerance, and the willingness to look stupid in pursuit of a result. Meanwhile, the person building wealth isn't thinking about any of this. They're not reverse engineering their success or writing Medium posts about their journey. They're already on to the next thing because staying still feels more dangerous than moving forward. They've internalized something that smart people often learn too late. The market doesn't reward correct analysis, it rewards correct action. And correct action usually comes from doing something, seeing what breaks, fixing it, and doing it again. Let me be clear about something that sounds counterintuitive but explains everything you're seeing. Intelligence doesn't just slow you down through overthinking, it actively trains you to avoid the exact behaviors that build wealth. Every year you spend in advanced education, every promotion you earn through analytical excellence, every complex problem you solve with your brain, you're getting better at a game that has almost nothing to do with making money. You're optimizing for being right instead of being rich, and those two things are almost never the same. Think about how smart people approach risk. They build spreadsheets. They calculate downside scenarios. They want to see the data, understand the variables, model the outcomes. This feels responsible and intelligent because that's exactly what school and corporate jobs taught them to do. But here's what's actually happening. While they're building their decision-making framework, the opportunity is moving. Markets shift, competitors enter, the perfect moment passes. By the time the analysis is complete, they're no longer evaluating the original opportunity. They're evaluating a completely different situation, which means they need to start the analysis over, which means they never actually do anything. The person who barely graduated high school doesn't have this problem, not because they're brave, but because they can't see most of the risks. Their analysis is simple. Will someone pay me for this? Can I deliver it? Okay, let's go. They're not ignoring complexity. They literally don't perceive it. And in the early stages of wealth building, this blindness is a massive advantage because most of the risks that smart people worry about never actually materialize. They're theoretical dangers that feel real because intelligence makes you good at imagining problems that don't exist yet. Here's something nobody talks about in business school. Speed has a multiplier effect that compounds faster than quality in the beginning stages of any venture. The person who launches a mediocre product today and improves it based on customer feedback will beat the person who launches a perfect product 6 months from now almost every single time. Why? Because the first person gets 6 months of market education, customer relationships, and revenue that the second person doesn't have. They're learning what actually matters instead of guessing what might matter. And what actually matters is almost never what you think will matter before you start. But smart people struggle with this because launching something mediocre feels wrong. It violates everything they've learned about excellence and preparation. They've been rewarded their entire lives for submitting polished work, for having the right answer, for not making mistakes. So they wait, they refine. They add one more feature, fix one more bug, perfect one more detail. And while they're doing this, they're burning capital, losing momentum, and missing the window where being first matters more than being best. Watch what happens when both types of people encounter failure. The intelligent person treats failure as a data point that requires analysis. They want to understand exactly what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how to prevent it from happening again. This leads to paralysis because most failures are multifactorial. There's never one clean answer. So they end up in analysis loops, studying their mistakes instead of moving past them. The less intelligent person treats failure completely differently. It's just something that happened. They don't enjoy it, but they also don't overthink it. They try something else. This casual relationship with failure means they accumulate attempts faster, and attempts are the real currency of wealth building, not ideas or intelligence. Your brain is actively working against you if you're smart. Every business book you read gives you another framework to consider. Every podcast you listen to introduces another variable to evaluate. Every successful person's story makes you think you need to replicate their specific path. You're drowning in information that makes you feel productive while actually preventing you from producing anything. Meanwhile, the person who can't spell entrepreneur is out there being one, not because they have some secret knowledge, but because they never learned that starting a business was supposed to be complicated. There's a specific moment in every smart person's journey where they realize this. It usually happens when someone they consider less intelligent than them succeeds at something they were planning to do. The initial reaction is disbelief, then rationalization, then often bitterness. But occasionally, if they're honest with themselves, they recognize what actually happened. That person succeeded because they started before they felt ready, learned while doing instead of before doing, and treated obstacles as problems to solve rather than reasons to quit. Everything that looked like recklessness from the outside was actually just action bias, and action bias beats analytical rigor in the wealth game almost every time. The uncomfortable truth is that your intelligence is probably costing you money right now. Every decision you're delaying until you have more information is a decision that someone else is making without that information. Every opportunity you're evaluating carefully is an opportunity someone else is already executing poorly, but learning from rapidly. Every risk you're trying to eliminate is a lesson you're not learning. And those lessons compound into pattern recognition that no amount of reading or analysis can replicate. What makes this especially brutal is that by the time smart people figure this out, they're often a decade behind people who figured it out by accident, simply by not knowing any better. You spent years accumulating knowledge while they spent years accumulating attempts. You read case studies while they became case studies. You prepared for perfect conditions while they learned to operate in chaos. The gap isn't about what happened, it's about what you chose to prioritize, and intelligence made you prioritize the wrong things without you even realizing it. Here's where this gets really interesting. Once you understand that intelligence can be a liability, you can't unsee it. Every time you catch yourself researching instead of testing, you'll recognize it as the trap it is. Every time you delay a decision to gather more data, you'll see the opportunity cost in real time. Every time you choose preparation over action, you'll know exactly what you're trading away. And that awareness creates a weird kind of tension because now you're fighting your own nature. Smart people who successfully build wealth do something specific. They artificially lower their standards for what constitutes ready. They force themselves to launch at 60% instead of 90%. They treat their first attempt as a prototype, not a product. They build feedback loops into their process so they're learning from reality instead of theory. Basically, they hack their own intelligence by redirecting it away from planning and toward iterating. This requires genuine humility, which intelligent people often lack. You have to admit that your carefully reasoned analysis might be completely wrong. You have to accept that the market doesn't care how smart your strategy is if nobody wants what you're selling. You have to embrace looking foolish in the short term to avoid being irrelevant in the long term. That's uncomfortable when your entire identity is built around being the person with the right answers. Watch what happens when smart people finally make this shift. They become unstoppable because they're combining intelligence with action bias. They still think strategically, but they test rapidly. They still analyze data, but they generate data through experiments rather than research. They still learn from others, but they learn by doing adjacent things, not by studying from a distance. The intelligence that was blocking them becomes rocket fuel once they remove the hesitation. The people who never make this shift, they become bitter. They convince themselves the system is rigged, that success is about luck or connections or timing. They develop elaborate explanations for why less intelligent people are outperforming them. They retreat further into analysis and theory because that's where they feel competent. And they spend decades being smart and broke while watching dumb and rich people live the life they designed on paper, but never built in reality. There's something almost tragic about watching highly intelligent people waste their advantage. They have pattern recognition that could spot opportunities others miss. They have analytical ability that could optimize systems others fumble through. They have communication skills that could sell ideas others can't articulate. But none of that matters if they never start. Intelligence without execution is just expensive entertainment. Think about the last business idea you had. How long did you spend thinking about it before testing it? Did you write a business plan before you had a single customer? Did you design a perfect system before you knew if anyone wanted what you were offering? Did you solve problems that didn't exist yet? That's your intelligence protecting you from the discomfort of being wrong, and that protection is keeping you exactly where you are. The brutal reality is that wealth building rewards speed of iteration more than depth of analysis. You learn more from one failed product launch than from 10 books about product launches. You gain more insight from one awkward sales conversation than from 100 podcasts about sales techniques. You develop more business acumen from 1 month of actual operations than from a year of studying successful companies. Experience isn't just the best teacher, it's the only teacher that actually changes your bank account. So what do you do with this information? First, recognize that if you're reading this and nodding along, you're probably one of the smart people stuck in analysis mode. Second, identify one thing you've been planning or researching or preparing for. Third, cut your preparation timeline in half and launch it anyway. Not when it's ready, not when you've figured everything out, not when conditions are perfect. Now, at whatever percentage of ready it currently sits. Will it be messy? Absolutely. Will you make mistakes? Guaranteed. Will you wish you'd prepared more? Definitely. But will you learn more in 1 month of messy action than in 6 months of pristine planning? Without question. And that learning compounds into pattern recognition that no amount of intelligence can manufacture artificially. Your intelligence is a tool, not an identity. Stop letting it make decisions for you. Stop using it as an excuse for inaction. Stop hiding behind analysis when what you really need is data that only comes from trying things and watching what happens. The market doesn't reward the smartest business plan. It rewards the business that exists and solves a problem someone will pay to fix. Every day you spend being smart about wealth instead of building wealth is a day someone less intelligent is getting further ahead. Not because they have some advantage you lack, but because they never learned that starting was supposed to be hard. They just started. And then they kept going. And eventually, that simple, almost stupid persistence created results your intelligence is still planning to achieve. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to build wealth. You obviously are. The question is whether you're brave enough to stop being smart about it and start being simple about it instead. The gap isn't closing, it's widening. Right now, while you're watching this, someone with half your credentials is making their 5th business pivot this year. They've failed twice, broken even once, and their current venture is finally catching momentum. They don't have your vocabulary or your degrees or your careful decision-making framework. What they have is 12 months of real-world data that you can't buy, borrow, or study your way into. You've been taught that intelligence is the ultimate advantage, that understanding complex systems, analyzing data, and making informed decisions is how you win. But wealth building isn't a test you can study for. It's a game where the only way to learn the rules is to play badly first. The sooner you start playing, the sooner you start learning. The longer you wait to feel ready, the further behind you fall. Stop treating your next move like a dissertation. Stop requiring perfect information before you act. Stop using your intelligence as permission to delay. Pick something small enough that failure won't destroy you, but real enough that success would matter. Then launch it at whatever percentage of ready it currently is. Not next month. Not when you've figured out the marketing. Not when you've built the perfect system. Today. Messy. Incomplete. Ready or not. Because the person getting rich isn't smarter than you. They just started before they felt ready, and that head start compounds into something your intelligence alone can never catch.